Hello, this is One Bottle, Three Questions. I'm Nelson Pari. Here with me, Mike Best, Master Wine. Today we're drinking the 2020 Don Alvaro, the Albariño from Granbazan, here with Diego Rios. Let's start right away with the first question.
I live in close to Manchester, an area famous for being rainy and windy, but looking at the numbers, we get about 1100 millimetres of rain here a year, so it always feels like it's 12 degrees and raining, but the numbers in Ríos are even higher, so how on earth do you deal with this as a winemaker, Diego, and can you tell us what the numbers are in terms of how much rain you get?
The rain there is definitely quite something. It's definitely that requires character and personality to endure. Moreover, if you're not born and raised there, of course, like, which is actually my case. In average, real spices you will have around 1,600 millimeters a year. But right on the coast, where we are located in the south area within Real Spices, it is called Salnes Valley, where our vineyards are displayed, which are actually most of them not further than 5 kilometers to the coast. We were talking about more than in the 2,000 millimeters a year. At the very end, you can precise everything that you do in the vineyards, of course, and your canopy management, your plant protection plan. You can go to the very core and very specific. But if it rains that much, there's nothing that you can do. So at the very end of the story is quite simple. Like, you're always on hands of the weather and how the vintage is showing. Just to paint you the picture, last November, I'm talking about November 2023. I live around 30 minutes southern from the winery. We were about to beat the record of 2006 of 36 days in a row of rain. We didn't we didn't manage to beat the record. We went up to 32, but yeah, I mean, that's definitely viticulture wise. It is definitely every year is a new world, and every year is a challenge now.
One of the issues in terms of the problems that I've seen going visiting Europe for the first part of this year is mildew in lots of places in Europe. But how would you set up your vineyards, and what specifics can you do to mitigate this in the vineyard?
I mean, of course, mildew is the things that we struggle the most. Mildew, and is from all diseases that you can get in during the season, mildew is the worst one. Of course, you lose bunches, you lose leaves, it damages the wood for next year. So it's the worst that you can have. And moreover, when it's super hard to eradicate, almost impossible. So, um, on the other hand, regardless of what you might think, after this is such a wet area, we don't struggle much with botrytis. We don't struggle much with powdery mildew, of course, because it's not that hot. So mildews are our main concern from the very beginning of the season to after the blossom. So, we base our plant protection in terms of the numbers that to weather stations that we have displayed. One is actually located in our main state and in our main vineyard, which is the Tremoedo state. One is located over there, but that one belongs to the government actually, and the other one is one that we install ourselves a little bit up north from the area where the winery is located, and we base everything that we do in the vineyards uh, through what these two station gives us. Of course, they go through a software, and they enable you to know how the incubation of how the state of that particular moment of brain. What is generating in terms of development of the disease, so you can do your managing as proper as you can, of course. And we in Spain we have very like a lot of restrictions. I will dare to say that it's even higher restrictions than in other European countries in terms of what you can do, and you have to combine this restriction, of course, with the one that you have in terms of your sustainability program. We have been certified with a Fair and Green, which is a German certification in terms of sustainability since already at the first vintage. I think it was 22. Um, so you have to combine all those two. Plus, of course, we have extra imposed restriction because we have some water courses near our main areas, and of course we're very close to the Atlantic, and also you have those little rivers and water courses like going through our vineyards when actually they impose to use completely different range of products compared to other areas. So you have to really endure many factors in order to be very precise and to go as sustainable as possible. Beside that, of course, you depend on the vintage. I mean, it sounds terrible because of the numbers that I told you before, but it's not all vintages has been horrible in terms of downy mildew. I remember particularly 2020 being very bad. I remember 2022, it rained the second half of May and the first half of June nonstop. I remember that very vividly because we were like, yeah, this is hard.
How many products or technique have you tried to combat mildew? And is there a better one that you are focusing on when you have like a huge spread of mildew around your vineyards?
I mean, there's nothing that you can do to heal it. So everything, all the measurements that we take are preventive measurements. So of course, in terms of flat protection, everything that you have in the palette, which actually has narrowed to maybe I don't know 10 products these days, you know, at the very beginning of the season, you start with some products. They act a certain way. More actually, well, we start with a couple of systemic products, and then we just stop systemic and we just do what is called, I don't know if it's the name in English correct, but it's called penetrant. And then we play, of course, with how the situation is going in terms of weather. Of course, if you can skip application, of course we do as little as possible, actually, on the very line of being very dangerous. But the restrictions in our area are super heavy. So, but you cannot forget that it's still a business. I mean, you cannot forget that you cannot do anything if you don't have healthy grapes. Not just grapes, healthy grapes is important thing. The major action that we do is we have all of our vineyards are displayed in Galician Parra, no, in the high trellis. So that's how viticulture has been developed here in the last 1,000 years. Albariño has been cultivated in the area for over 1,000 years, and of course, the most modern part of this history has developed into high trellis. Not only because of the weather, of course, you want to keep your grapes as far as you can from the humidity of the ground, because as it is heavy rain, you need to maintain that beautiful green cover in our vineyards, but of course that maintains a lot of humidity. So you want to go high with your grapes in order to have healthy grapes at the very end of the season. But historically, these families have had a second crop on the bottom. Of course, you have Albariño on the top, and then the bottom you have maybe paprika or potatoes or something like that. The major action that we do is just maintain that, which has been cultural developed, but of course it's expensive. Granite posts and concrete posts is way more expensive than in a normal trellis system, right? So you have to really commit to it. We don't do any shoot thinnings, but we do actually do a late topping of the vines. When you see, well, like the shoots are hanging down and closing down like the street of the Parra Gallega. So you need to go, but we try to kind of like maintain them in the wire, and later on, a certain point later on the season, you cut them in order to maintain the wind blowing. But high trellis is for us actually quite a significant part of controlling that the grapes are drier faster.
The Don Alvaro ferments spend his first year in a big neutral oak vat, and then you move it into stainless steel for further maturation. In hearing that, for me, is quite unusual because usually, is the opposite. First, you ferment in stainless steel, and then you move to oak. And especially when it comes down to Albariño, we are used to drink wines in the market that are purely made in stainless steel. So this is a wine that can be sort of a really unusual for many Albariño drinkers. So why you use this process? What is the history of oak and Albariño originally, and all of that? Like, how does that come into play?
Well, I mean that is it's definitely something new. We're not the first ones or the only ones. Of course, there are a couple of more people working, and but very little. Of course, as you said correctly, this has been a very modern like uh, vinification, very 90s, like in many ways in Rios, but just the way that has been developed now. So a lot of times still the like the new or alternative containers for fermentation or for aging, they're kind of like quite recent in the history, and it's starting like pretty heavy, but recent. The things big wooden vats in stainless steel, same grapes, same appellation, same know-how. It's something that I had studied a lot as because of my background in the Mosul River. Of course, like the big wines of the Mosul River are not only in the Mosul, of course, in many other places in Germany, but the Mosul is kind of like very characteristic. Are being produced in big wooden vats. So as you're not looking for presence of oak or what the oak can communicate into the wine, what you're looking for is the container. In terms of big wooden vats, we're talking about 2,600 liters. So you want that to be neutral. Each vat is a world, it's a different world. So it can be that the first year they communicate a little bit of this oak person, but they tend to be very neutral. Moreover, the tonnellerie where we're working, the fouderie that we're working with is tend to be very neutral. So what you want is the recipient, right? Like the shape of the recipient, the micro oxidation, of course, the warmth that you can maintain into the vat. So, and for example, what we ferment in the big wooden vats is everything spontaneous fermented. So you need to maintain the warmth whenever the fermentation goes lower. So it doesn't. Normally in stainless steel, it cools down very fast. If you at least you have the structure or the facility to warm it up again. So in our case, we need to maintain that in order to finish the fermentation. In Don Alvaro, since I started in the winery in 2019, it was kind of like the wine what I personally had a more of a carte blanche in order to bring my experience from the Mosul or from the other places that I worked before starting in Granbazan. And for me, I mean, the last 7 years of my life before starting in Granbazan, I was working this way with very high end whites, different variety, of course, but for me the answer or whether I started to go deeper and it was pretty clear. So yeah, we managed to get to become customers from Shockinga, and since then we have bring one big wooden vat every year.
You worked at Heymann-Löwenstein in the Lower Mosel for 7 years, and I think that the influence of even the bottle, like the Albariño flute, has this kind of synergy with Riesling. I think that there's this some kind of parallel. How do you see the two grapes, Albariño and Riesling, as similar and as different?
Albariño is definitely more of a spoiled wine than Riesling. Riesling is just so amazing from the very beginning, and as the time passes, it goes insanely good. And Alvariño, it can follow that way if you do everything correctly. But if you do one mistake, like yeah, this is way more sensitive and reactive to whatever happens into their environment. I'm talking about vineyard, cellar, aging, and of course in that case, I guess like I always thought that in the Mosul River everything works by itself. That you do very little enology, you don't do almost anything actually, and everything kind of like finds its way. And I wouldn't say that Alvariño definitely needs a little bit more support and a little bit more being on top of it. It's more of a sensitive in that kind of aspect, but. Of course, if you're talking about high acidity wines that then age perfectly, they are able to show a completely different aspect of it. It's a completely different wine after a couple of years in the bottle that evolves into something more serious, more. Of course, everybody enjoys the more younger, fresher, fruitier aspect of the variety in this early age, or the wines that were thought to communicate or to portray that, the ones that had more of a faster flow and consume. Of course, we enjoy those definitely, but if you concentrate in the vintages that have been very very good, and they have already a couple of years in the bottle, they evolve into completely different product, into something way more competitive internationally in terms of the serious wide, and I guess I get to see those two parts, because the winery have worked with older vintages from the very beginning. It's not something that came with me or something. Of course, age Albariño is something kind of like on the topic maybe for the last 7 or 8 years. Before that, of course, the paradigm of Albariño being very young and expressive was very vivid still. And now actually the subject is the capacity of aging, and the capacity of 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 the plurality that this variety has. Of course, if you put it in barrel, or you create a barrel Albariño, which we have the longest history with barrel Albariño, because the first barrel Albariño ever done in the appellation was made in Granbazán. It's our limousine, first vintage 89. You have to think back in the 80s, of course. How do you add value to this wine? Of course, you put it in variable. That's kind of like the Spanish answer to it, right? And of course, that has changed. But we have stick to this wine. Then now actually helps you to break also another paradigm that Albariño has, and I fight a lot against that paradigm. That Albariños stick to just seafood, right? Of course, we enjoy that definitely, but of course, the variety can do a wide of different range of cuisine, sort of speaking. But of course, for in terms of sales, they always try to lead that one to that direction, understandable. But wines that has a little bit more age in the bottle, very concentrated about terroir, or that has a little bit more of a aging in barrique, in the case of limousine, helps you to break that structure, help you to understand that you're able to break that structure easily. So that's why I'm very happy that I have, for example, something that is rare like limousine in the portfolio. But yeah, I guess I mean, the two varieties have completely different aspects of it, and they're both beautiful. And I know it sounds cliche what I'm saying right now, but it's actually the truth. So yeah, invite you to different histories, I guess. So that's the interesting thing.
Is there something that you've learned? Because we talked about the oak, but is there anything else that you've learned in those years in the Mosel that you're now using actively every year in your winery and in your vineyards?
Mm, well, definitely. Um, there's many things that I've learned in my years in the Mosul that I brought with me in doing Granbazan. For example, the pruning system, we were very focused in the Mosul in the soft method of pruning system that you guys have developed in Italy, and that's very well known from Italy. And I guess in Rios spices, something that these days is you see more often. But I'm talking about 5 years ago. It was kind of like they knew that existed about how to implant it there. It wasn't a thing, and I was responsible to implant that in Germany, in the Mosel River, for the years that I was there. So of course, in Pergola and Parra Gallega, this is a completely different story. But we tried to emulate as much as we could, and we have done it already 5 years. And actually, we're kind of like in a rough path, but because that requires a lot of education to the people that is actually doing the cuts, right? And they have been working in these vineyards for many 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 years, and and so when it's always have to bring something new, and they're always a little bit more skeptical. I'm not from the area also, so I get a lot of skepticism at the very beginning. But I think we have worked very well, and it kind of like works. So for them at the beginning, as you have such a massive structure on the wire, right? It was unthinkable if there's a part of the oak that you're not using, not to cut that off. Unthinkable. Why? You need to remove that. And I was like, no, no, you don't. Well, so that was kind of like a It requires a little bit of schooling, but now these days we do a soft pouring. We don't get rid of any. We don't do any big or damaging woods into our plants, because we had a lot of humidity, and always when it never gets that cold here, so it's always wet and a little bit warm, so it's perfect for wood and fungal diseases to go in. So yeah, that's mainly in the vineyards. In the winery, in terms of winemaking, uh, I guess, of course, for me, my perception when I arrived there, it was like Galicia. It really reminds me to Chile in the 90s in many ways. Big tanks, more of a kind of like everything stainless steel, everything fresh, new, clean. And I guess like and Galicia has the portfolios of the wineries in Galicia also still to these days a very big cuvee, important cuvee focus. And I guess like and I was from a background where we have just Riesling, but from 6 different appellations. So I guess I have been trying to conciliate those two worlds, and not in order to produce 100 different wines, just in order to understand the components of our important cuvées, more up to the detail. So since I arrived in 19, we work with over 80 families, what is known as Galician small scale agriculture, which is the most traditional and more social driven way to produce wine, house. Moreover, in the Sanés Valley, which is kind of like the Mount Everest of Galician small scale agriculture, because if you move southern Galicia, it's more common to find a winery that has more of a vast piece of land that belongs to the winery, or even 100% state grown. But actually, the most traditional and the most cultural way to produce wine in Rios is actually working with these families. So the Granbazan has always been more like a hybrid model. So we have our vineyards and we work with families, where we work with 80 families that have been in the winery for over 30 years, right? So in order for them to understand that they were not being able to harvest just the Sunday when the friends come over to help, and it's gonna be the day where everybody in your little parroquia, which is even smaller than a village, are harvesting, because we're vinificating everything separately now. Yeah, it was a struggle. But vintage 19 was the first time that we did it like very up to the detail, and it worked because it was a small vintage. So it was actually kind of perfect. And kind of like that set the base for the future. So it was at the very beginning was like, oh, the people need to, they don't hire pickers, so they need friends to in order to have harvest a little plot. So they invite friends over during the weekend. So we are not probably gonna be able to do that on a Wednesday. And I said like, yeah, but when at a certain point we need to start. And I said it was a small vintage, and the health condition of the grapes were perfect. We were able to organize it. People saw that it worked, that it was doable. So we have actually been even divided, even smaller divisions within one parroquia, in order to understand how the variety behaves in the different kind of soils. And then I guess at least in Granbazan there was a lot of focus on the quality back then and through the 90s and 2000s. But now we are living this new phase, which is kind of like, it's quality but also very related to terroir, which is for me very logical because of my background in the Mosul. But he very still to be developed and to discover. It has been fun. Has been fun. We have vintage 21. It was a little bit complicated because it was very unripe. Everybody getting nervous, and so that's why we struggle a little bit now to get the proper organization. But 23, for example, it works. We can narrow it down even to smaller divisions within families, and that has been that work.
So this was a bottle and 3 questions, and the questions were: question 1, discussing the rain in Ríos Baixas and the effects and how you work with that. Question 2 was about the use of oak and the texture achieved in Albariño, and question 3 was about Diego's experiences in the Mosul and the comparisons between Riesling and Albariño. So that's been great.
Thanks so much for having me. That was fun.